evening. Good evening, everyone, and I mean everyone. And those of you watching at home, since 6:30 this evening, this Board of Education has been in closed session for 3 items: appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, and dismissal of specific employees of the district; litigation, when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular district has been filed or is pending before a court or administrative tribunal; and finally, the setting of a price for sale or lease of property owned by the district. So with that, I will entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved. Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second to come out of closed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And welcome everyone that, if you're physically here or you're watching from home. Our mission, which we live every day, which our administrators and students live every day, is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. And I'll ask our board secretary for a roll call, please.
Sure. Board members present: Kristen Fitzgerald, Susan Price, Jackie Romberg, Susan Crotty, and Donna Watkey.
Thank you very much.
Just good news. I'll remind you just real quick, 2 weeks from Wednesday, first day of school. Students are to report on Wednesday, August 20th, for our first day of school. Administrators were all busy today planning for the coming school year. We're excited about the next school year. So a lot of hard work and a lot of great work coming up.
Awesome. Public comments are our next agenda item, and for those of you watching at home, this is an opportunity. Every meeting we have, the public can come and speak if they're speaking on behalf of a group, 5 minutes, or individually 3 minutes, and they can present anything they'd like in front of the Board of Education. So I don't have any slips and don't think there's anyone in the audience, so we will move on to our communication sections. Superintendent, staff, school report.
We don't have any reports this evening.
And I don't have a president's report. Any Board of Education reports this evening? Okie doke. So I'll entertain a motion for consent, please.
I'll make a motion to approve 701, the adoption of the personnel report.
Second.
So hi.
Okay. We have a motion and a second for the adoption of the personnel report. Ms. Bell?
Price.
Yes.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Watkey. Yes. Romberg.
Yes.
Crotty. Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. And with that?
We do have a quick introduction for the board this evening, and because she is here taking up our audience space, we'll make sure that we introduce and welcome Jennifer Donatelli as the Director of Curriculum. Your action through the consent agenda approved her appointment. She fills the vacancy that was left by Jane Willard moving into the Assistant Superintendent position. Jennifer has great experience working at the middle school level as a project manager here and has done great work already and will continue to be a great leader for us in the curriculum department. So, Jenny, congratulations and welcome to administration.
We're thrilled you're here in this position. Okie doke. Next thing on our agenda, a discussion, 2 items this evening, discussion without action, just being introduced to the Board of Education this evening. Item number 8.01, first reading of policy 4.30, revenue and investments.
So as the board is aware, we've been working pretty hard at updating and making current all of our policies, and so we continue with that work this evening. The relevance of the timeline with these is that we are interested in looking at our revenue and investment strategy. Prior to doing that, we're going to review the policy. And then also, with the beginning of another school year, as we move into purchases and procurement, this is the right time. Also, as we have new staff that come on board to ensure that we have the most current policy. And as you saw from the backup that was provided to you in board docs, the press recommendation for 4.3, which is item number 8.01, regarding revenue and investments, very minor changes that Brad can speak to in a moment. And then also then under item number 8.02, policy 455, we are recommending no changes to policy. There are some recommendations for changes in the user manuals that Brad will speak to. So I'll turn it over to Brad.
Okay, thank you. Well, dealing with policy, the investment policy 430, really press is just the first thing is on the first the page 1. They're adding a little section that basically just says, you know, your investments need to be in a bank or, you know, that's covered by federal deposit insurance, which we do, which is good sound advice, and we were doing prior. And then the only really other change was on their, well, there's 2 other changes, I'm sorry, on their collateralization requirement. They're removing the specific language. We had laid out there before, you know, it has to be a AAA rated bond or whatever. for collateralization, and now they're just simply pointing to the Public Funds Act in the law, because that's a new section passed with everything that's been going on. The legislature wanted to make sure people were collateralizing correctly. So we want to comply with that. Well, we already comply with it, but we want to change the policy to reflect that. So if the law changes in the future, we don't have to change our policy, we just would change any procedure. And then finally, on the last page, they just simply provide one other sentence there when it comes to interest transfers. It just clarifies that, you know, the board's free to transfer interest from whatever fund that's made it, as long as it's not restricted. An example would be is debt service interest. If we gain interest income on debt service, that needs to be reserved and used to pay off bonds. It's only once the bonds are all paid off that then the funds would be available for the district to make a determination. So that'd be an example of a restriction. Questions?
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Kristen.
This is just a more of a technical question. Your addition, it's language, but you write investments may be made only in banks, where in the other sentence you use the word with banks. And I'm thinking that under collateral requirements, we talk about amounts deposited or invested with financial institutions. I'm thinking that it's probably more accurate to say with, because we don't really invest in the bank. It's a bank product, right?
You know, and this is straight off of press. I mean,
Right.
So, you know, is that you know?
I don't think it's. I think if the board's more comfortable with that direction, we can go to that. I understand your point.
We're not
Preston,
investing
right.
in the bank. We're investing in a bank product.
Well, actually, we cannot invest in banks.
But it says
Interestingly
in
enough.
banks.
You know what? No, we
Weirdly.
can't invest in banks. So,
Right.
yeah, no, I have no problem with the change. It's just pressed it and look at it as
Well,
you can't invest in banks.
right. It's probably a little semantic. You could say, because also too is, you know, you can be buying, you know, I mean, I guess technically when you're buying a CD from a bank, you know, it says your investments may be made only in banks. Well, if the bank is the one selling the commercial paper or the certificate of deposit, technically you are investing in that bank. And so when you look at actually that collateralization section, it does also in the law specify, you know, you cannot be, like say it was a small credit union. You know, you cannot exceed, your investment cannot exceed 50% of their net shareholder worth. So they don't want you to be too large of an investor if you were buying, like, say, certificate deposits or bank things. So in some ways, the word only, you know, made only in is fine. It's how you're viewing it.
So, but technically, I certainly understand and appreciate that clarification. But there are also shareholders of banks.
Correct.
And
there
we
is.
cannot invest in a bank. So that's the distinction I would make. This school district cannot invest in a bank. I understand what you're saying. They have a product they issue called a CD. So, I mean, it's semantics. I'm
Yeah.
not going to die on my sword one way or another. So
It's fine. Like Superintendent
if it's a
said,
clarification
one
people
way
feel
or the other.
comfortable with. But any other comments or questions on this, on 8.01? No? Okay. 8.02.
I'll speak to the policy first, and I'll let you speak to the procedure manual and the user manual. Press recommendation, there was one change that they recommended in point number 3 under the policy on each card holder. Press has a recommendation of a a specific dollar amount. We feel that our language in terms of establishing based on the user and the need is better for us, because the press language was certainly above a limit of what we would expect most of our people to make their purchase on, so we wouldn't recommend that we make that change. And then also there were some language changes in point number 4 that we believe is addressed through procedures. So we recommend that your approval will be to approve the policy as is. It's still important that you do that because it was last approved, I think, 2005 or something, 9, okay? So let's make it current and get it brought up to that you've reviewed it and that it is current, but we do have some recommendations for change in the procedure manual. I'll have Brad speak to those.
Right. So basically, to work in conjunction with the board policy, we have put together a more detailed user manual, which you have. I just highlight a few things. On page 3, we clarified that using the purchase order is the preferred method of making a purchase. On page 3, we also recommend removing the per transaction limits and replacing it with the monthly credit limit, which is a more appropriate control because we can actually monitor that and actually have controls with the bank. And then page 4, we clarify appropriate travel expenditures, since P-card is frequently used with travel. And then finally, on page 5 and 6, we lay out specific what we call code of conducts. Now, this policy manual is based on a sample from the Illinois Association of Business Officials. So, so we borrowed or using their manual. And then finally, as Superintendent Bridges already said, we recommend no changes to Policy 455 or Policy 455 AP, as we see those aligning, or this manual aligns with those as we have already explained. So with that, this is what we would want to be able to give out to all of our employees and have them sign off appropriately and be educated on this manual.
Shirley.
Under the transportation part on 455, it talks about air travel as the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just curious, would you consider adding things like, there's often like extra charges, or like we won't pay for early check-in.
They state that. It's stated in here. We'll not pay for early check-in. We'll not pay convenience. Yeah. It's a little bit later, but no early bird check-in. I remember that.
Right, it's number 6. So under transportation, item number 6, convenient charges such as a valet, early bird seating, and curbside check-in are not paid.
Curbside check-in, that was the other one. You couldn't remember.
Yeah, not paid for by using district funds. Because we have
Good question.
had a couple of questions on that.
Great.
And how about like what do you call it? The pre-approval, the TSA, like just so somebody goes, oh, I had to put this through for $100 or whatever.
TSA.
Like you can get the TSA.
Yeah,
the
for
pre- yeah,
$85
yeah.
you can get a pre-certified
Oh, right.
TSA
Yeah.
application, so we can add
Yeah,
that.
we can add that. That wouldn't be an appropriate expense for us.
Yeah. I thought you meant the $2.50 charge is going up to $5. Well, they can't fly. So I.
For the cars, do you not say like mid-size or smaller, like you don't?
We certainly can.
I'm just asking.
It's not, to my knowledge, it's not been kind of raised as an issue. It's not something that I've kind of hit my
Wouldn't
radar.
it depend
so-
on if you have 4 or 5 people? It would-
You might have luggage and you might need a minivan.
Yeah, so,
We send groups, which we have before to conferences. That
right. You hope that they do that versus 4 small,
But
mid-sized cars.
But our policy doesn't say. I mean, I'm just,
Yeah.
we're trying to live by those. It's just.
You could say like most economical.
I mean, how much travel is there, though? I mean,
not
how
a
it
lot.
works for the state. It was, the stuff we had to go through made it such a hassle, and you're already leaving your I mean, I just,
Well-
what is the payoff for us? I mean, if somebody's gonna rent a high-end car, I think that expense is gonna be called out. I mean, why do you have
The
to
Mustang.
go
And
through-
it does have to be pre-approved by their
Right.
supervisor, so they would need to speak with their supervisor about what it is they're renting.
Correct.
Yeah. I don't wanna put too much, I mean, it just starts to feel
Yeah, I think on that,
punitive at some
I
point.
would have to run. I don't know that like a car rental is a common expense that we have. It's an occasional for sure, but I would think other internal controls regarding the approval would catch that prior.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
so in addition to the policy and the manual that we're reviewing, do we also, how often, do we also review who is the list of people who are using the P cards, and if it's still appropriate from year to year for them to have those?
Okay, well,
Well, for preparation for this work, the users have been reviewed, and there are some recommendations that Brad's brought forward, even regarding credit limits and things like that. We see some of the things that he's looked at is the average expenses per month over the past several months, and see that many cases expenses are not coming near what their limit is. So we've Brad's recommended that we drop their limits. So it's more of a periodic. I don't know that it's on a set schedule, something that we could look at, but certainly I know with the review for preparation for this recommendation, it has been reviewed and certainly reviewed by our purchasing official to ensure that people who leave the district no longer have access to those.
So as people's roles change, do they, like, for instance, if you had a coach who was going to use it for gas I know those are actually assigned out to the vans, but as people's roles change, do we also look at whether or not their
Yes.
need for P card changes
That's
as well?
correct, yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
I have one more question.
Under the reimbursement for meals, is $40 a day enough? Like, if you're stuck at a hotel, a $10 lunch is nearly impossible.
I haven't heard any feedback from anybody that says it limits them, and I think if we look at it as more of the $40 per day and the 10 and the 20 is more of a guideline, you're gonna, in many cases, you're not gonna find a breakfast or a lunch at that. It's gonna be less sometimes. So I think the amount per day is valid. At least at this point, I wouldn't make a recommendation for change at this point. Many conferences have the
Included.
meal
Yeah, they
within
talked
it,
about that. You have to
so.
adjust for that, right?
Yeah.
right.
I just have a question about, I'm just looking at the part about, right at the very beginning, about using the purchase orders when we can. And so it has the different areas where we would be able to use the procurement cards, like the vendor doesn't accept purchase orders, the vendor will not bill, they can be acquired only in person or online. In those cases, I know that you mentioned the tax exempt letter. Does the tax exempt letter go to everyone who has a P card, and are they able to utilize that letter when they do the in-person and online purposes? Obviously, you wouldn't be able to use a letter online, but can they get tax exempt online or in person?
No, so like let's do with online first. So if
You
online
make sure your
purchasing-
microphone's on.
Huh?
Make sure your microphone's on or
Oh,
talking
it
to it.
is, sorry. So for online, let's start with that. For online, they would need to go through the process to make sure that the vendor understands it's tax exempt, may need to scan our letter and send it in. Some vendors might just say, okay, give me your number, and that's fine. It's really what the vendor's comfort is on making sure they have those, everything they need to withstand an audit.
But you would think we don't pay for taxes.
No, well, I
What
mean,
about Amazon? Do we pay tax when we order on Amazon?
There's a tax exempt Amazon. That's not that difficult.
Yeah,
do we do that?
I'm pretty sure we do not pay taxes on.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's relatively easy to use tax exempt
Yeah.
Amazon.
I mean, everybody really pushes to.
I don't pay taxes when I order something on Amazon.
Well, that's the other thing. So a lot of times, some things are not even sales taxes charged online. So we have a combination of things. But everybody that has a P card is given the tax exempt letter
And instructed
to make sure that they
Don't pay
not
tax.
getting charged tax.
Good.
Now, in person,
So in
they
person,
would-
like for example, a grocery store, because like for our FA, the fax, they often go to the grocery store and they have to buy like the supplies at night before the class or something.
Right.
Would they be able to use, they would have the
Yeah,
letter
they
and they would
would.
just.
Now, they might need to go to the,
Service
different-
desk.
Service desk to check out or to whatever, but they would just take a copy of it.
But they're instructed to do so, and do we verify that when we get their bills? Do we verify
Oh.
that there was no tax charge?
Yes, and
Okay.
if they did use, then Melanie's in charge, contacts them and.
And then they go back and
Right.
we get the refund, okay. I know that we had talked a little bit about specifically with Amazon purchases, the idea of some of those programs that our schools have used where they use a third party and they get 4% back or something, or Target, for example, has that program where you do the red card and you get 5% back or something like that. Do we do that with our P cards or?
Well, I can only speak to the Amazon one
Yeah.
specifically because you mentioned that, so
Yeah.
we did research
Yeah.
that. What the Amazon one is, it's actually an advertising thing. We'd have to list them on our front
Okay.
page, on our home web
Okay.
page,
Okay.
and have a link for them to click on.
Okay,
And so we're kind of like,
It's not really
that's
worth
a
it.
lot of
Okay.
advertising for
Yeah.
the,
4% back.
yeah, so.
Questions? Brett, I had a question. In the under operational, first one, under operational services, 4.55.
On the actual
first one,
policy?
I'm sorry? No, on the actual guidelines, not the policy, the guidelines. Am I calling it the right thing? Administrative procedures.
Administrative procedures. Yep.
Administrative procedures. So the first item, require prior authorization before issuing a card to an individual. I get that. Whomever they have to, their supervisor, business office. Do the individuals, they don't require authorization before they make a purchase though, right? They don't need to
No.
do that.
Well, once they're issued the procurement card, you know, their responsibility is to keep their administrator informed.
Right.
You know, so they're not just.
So they don't need surprises because that
Right.
administrator's got to sign off on it.
Right, exactly.
So something I would just like to mention that you can think about, as I know different people that have done bills and claims, there's pizzas, there's flowers, all these things have great reasoning and are great for whatever the function is in mind. But as we go forward, would there be an economy of scale and a benefit to the district to use some preferred vendors? Don't know what those are, don't know if that would work with business partnerships, whatever, just to, is this making
Right,
sense?
right.
Just because everybody, after the P card is swiped, party's over. You can't say, oh, did you know that this vendor is local, can really help us out? And I had mentioned this to Dan, and there's another policy that we're going to review later, but I just wanted to make certain everybody kind of kept this in mind, because I think it is really important that we try to buy locally. We try to use businesses that help us out, help the district out, either in terms of responsiveness or tight pricing, whatever. But I don't need an answer on it now. I would just
Right.
love for that to.
Right, we'll come back with another
Yeah,
one of the
perfect.
policies, we'll talk about general overall purchasing, and that's
Perfect.
where we talk
Any
about
other
that.
comments or questions?
So if you did make a change like that, then you would just do a follow-on and say, here's some things that we have some additional guidelines and, okay.
Right.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Oh, go ahead.
How often, and this may be in here, I thought it was great that you showed the example of what everybody signs and that's in the policy as well as in here, so that
Right.
you're sort of saying, yes, I've read it, you know, yes, I'm familiar, yes, I will follow all these. And we do that annually?
No, once you're issued a card, unless there's a change, then you don't refill out the forms.
Okay.
Now, with this new guide, we will be doing a, district-wide.
Clean
well,
sweep.
Yeah,
Okay.
clean sweep to all
So there will
the.
be all new and everybody will do this?
Right, and everybody will make sure that everyone has the P card manual and make sure they're up to date on it.
And then additional people would just get similar kinds
Right,
of
and the
training and
new-
the similar, okay.
Sure.
So on the bottom of page 3, we have that the card holder may be responsible for the payment of any inappropriate and/or undocumented changes, or charges, I'm sorry. I guess what confuses me is the maybe. Like, if I were somebody who had a P card and I didn't give you an itemized receipt as indicated in number 3, why does it say maybe? Because I would think that they would be responsible.
That's a good question, right? I mean, it's like, why would we waive this? It seems a pretty good thing. Well, here's a situation we've had, and it seems very warranted. Bus driver stops, middle of the winter, blizzard, getting gas, gets his receipt, and it blows away. Okay, it can happen, I guess, right? So we've then contacted the vendor, and the vendor provides us with more of a summary receipt. But the individual itemized receipt, the vendor's like, look, we can't get you that detail, but it was, gasoline at this place, and we know the bus was there. Doesn't seem warranted to penalize that driver and make them pay for $150 worth of gas.
Now, if we were to see a pattern by a cardholder user
Yeah.
where that's happening on an ongoing basis, then that would have changed the approach. Another example may be where we require, as part of our procedure manual, the itemized receipt. That's not always made available, nor is it ever, it sometimes is it offered. So there would be times, and again, so we would look at pattern of use or misuse and make a decision on whether more strict controls need to be put in for an individual user.
This is a first reading, and I think we'll come back, second meeting in August for approval. Next.
Just if I could,
oh,
while we're on that, because a couple of you have asked, at the last board meeting, we did present to you a number of Section 3, knowing that, kind of this meeting was we have kind of a shorter meeting. We will be bringing those back for action with these at the second meeting in August. So they will come back for your action on August 18th.
Great. Next agenda item, 12.01, schedule of events. As you can see, things are blossoming there. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
With motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for being our audience participant, Jenny. And thank you for coming. It's very disruptive for hiring, not to have a meeting.